The cracked earth remembers thirst. So too does the heart remember loneliness. Kwame Owusu stood at the window of his Accra palace, a silhouette against the dying sun. Below, the city glittered, a serpent of cold light. His hands, once callous from hauling cocoa sacks in Kumasi's dust, now rested smooth and heavy on the cold glass. 60 winters had etched valleys around eyes that had seen empires rise and promises crumble. He wore a simple Kent smock, its gold threads dull in the twilight. The true gold, the billions mined, traded, hoarded, felt like river stones in his belly tonight. Cold, heavy, a hollowness echoed where his heart should beat. Vast and empty as the savanna sky after the rains flee. His wealth was legend. Schools bore his name. Hospitals rose where mud huts once slumped. His fleet of cars shimmered like wet obsidian. Yet the faces born from his own blood seemed carved from the same cold marble as his floors. Kofi, his son, sharp as a cut diamond, eyes always calculating unseen angles, lost in London's high-finance labyrinth. Abina, his daughter, whose laughter once rang like temple bells beneath their old Kumasi mango tree, now silenced by the curated perfection of Parisian salons, her voice a polished whisper. And Amma, his younger sister, the fierce one who had fought beside him through lean years, now swathed in Lagos silks, her fire banked beneath layers of guarded comfort. Their visits were scheduled storms, brief, efficient, leaving only the scent of expensive perfume and the lingering chill of distance. Kwame turned from the window. The vast room swallowed the sound of his footsteps. He sank into a chair upholstered in leather softer than a newborn's skin. Yet it offered no comfort. His gaze fell upon an old, faded photograph resting on an ebony table. A younger Kwame beaming, his late wife, Nana Ya, radiant as dawn. Kofi and Abina, small, sticky with mango juice, grinning gap-toothed beneath the sprawling branches of that tree. The tree whose roots drank the sweat of their struggle. Its shade had held their dreams before they grew wings or chains. Kwame. Nana Ya, my fierce flower. You saw them first, didn't you? The cracks in the clay, even as I polished the pot. Her smile in the photo seemed to deepen with sad knowing. The silence pressed in, louder than the distant city hum. It wasn't death he feared. It was the silence before it. The image haunted him, drawing his final breath in this echoing palace of glass and steel, surrounded by hired hands and the ghostly whir of machines that monitored a life already half departed. While his own flesh and blood, where were they? Did they see Kwame, the man who once carried Kofi on his shoulders through the market, who wiped Abina's tears with the hem of his rough work shirt? Or did they see only Obuohene, the mountain king, a monument of wealth casting a long, cold shadow? A sharp, unfamiliar pang stabbed beneath his ribs. He gasped, clutching his chest. Not pain, exactly. A sudden, terrifying emptiness, as if his very life force was draining into the polished floor. It passed quickly, leaving him shaken, sweat beading on his brow despite the room's cool air. Fear, cold and slick, coiled in his gut. Was this it? The whisper of the ancestors? The call he'd ignored amidst the roar of business? He called his personal physician, Dr. Mensah, a man whose eyes held the quiet depth of ancient baobabs. The examination was swift, thorough, in a private clinic room smelling faintly of antiseptic and something older, bitter, medicinal herbs. Dr. Mensah studied the scans, his brow furrowed not in worry, but in profound contemplation. He looked not at the images, but through them, then met Kwame's anxious gaze. Kwame Owusu. The machines, they see wires and currents, like tracing the path of a dry riverbed. They show strength, resilience. The body of a man who wrestled life and won. He paused, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But the heart is not just a pump of flesh. It is the drum that calls the spirit home. And yours, Obuohene, yours plays a rhythm the machines cannot hear. A rhythm of profound solitude. The body is strong, Kwame. But the spirit withers without the water of kinship. Kwame stared, the doctor's words striking deeper than any diagnosis of disease. It wasn't his arteries that were blocked. It was the channels of connection, silted with gold dust and neglect. The fear solidified into a cold, hard certainty. He knew with the chilling clarity of a moonlit night in the sacred grove that if he were truly lying on his deathbed tomorrow, the only footsteps rushing to his side would belong to lawyers and accountants, measuring the shadow his gold cast, not the man who cast it. The journey back to the mansion was silent. The city lights blurred into streaks of meaningless color. He dismissed the staff for the night. Alone in the cavernous silence, he stood again at the great window. Below, the glittering serpent pulsed, indifferent. The photograph of his family beneath the mango tree seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. A resolve, hard and sharp as flint, formed within him, not born of anger, but of a desperate, aching need to know, to see beneath the masks of duty and distance, to find, before the final drumbeat, if any drop of the old warmth, the old blood tie, still flowed in their veins, or if it had all turned to dust. He walked slowly to his imposing desk, carved from a single, ancient ebony log. He picked up the sleek, satellite phone, a lifeline to his scattered empire, his scattered family. His thumb hovered over the speed dial. His breath hitched. The vast emptiness of the room pressed in. Blood or dust? He pressed the button. The call connected, ringing out into the vast, indifferent night. His voice, when it came, was thick, strained, trembling with an anguish that was terrifyingly real. The anguish of a man staring into an abyss he himself had helped to dig. "Kofi, my son. Come quickly. The doctors, they say it is my heart. They say I do not have long." He closed his eyes, the silence after his words echoing louder than any drum. The die was cast. The Mountain King had chosen to become the beggar. He waited, the cold glass of the phone pressed to his ear, listening for the first sound of an answer, or the crushing weight of silence. Outside, the city glittered on, unaware that the fate of a king now hung on the fragile thread of a whispered lie, spoken to test the truth of blood, a lie spoken from the heart's deepest well. Does it draw poison or water? Kwame Owusu cast his net of false sickness into the wide sea, child. He baited it with the word fathers dread most. Come. Now he waited on the shore of his vast, empty palace, listening for the sound of true hearts beating against the tide of gold. The satellite phone felt like a live coal in Kwame's hand after the call ended. The silence that followed his trembling words to Kofi was thick, suffocating, broken only by the frantic drumming inside his own chest. A drumbeat of guilt and desperate hope. He made the same call to Abina in Paris, then to Amma in Lagos. Each time his voice cracked like parched earth, repeating the doctor's grim, fabricated prognosis. "The heart not long come, please come." Each time, the silence after hung heavy, a shroud before the response. Kofi's voice, when it finally crackled through the London static hours later, was sharp, efficient, stripped bare of warmth like a skeleton in the sun. "Father. Understood. I am rearranging critical mergers. I will expedite travel. Expect me within 48 hours. Have your financial directives prepared." Click. The cold precision of it pierced Kwame deeper than any illness could. His son heard death and thought dividends. Abina's call came bathed in the soft, artificial light of a Parisian dawn filtering through his phone. Her voice was a polished pearl of concern, rehearsed, slightly breathless. Papa! Mon Dieu! My heart, it breaks. I am booking the first flight. Jean-Pierre insists on accompanying me, of course. He has connections at the best cardiac clinics in Geneva. We must get a second opinion. Beneath the gilded worry, Kwame heard the rustle of silk, the clink of fine china. The performance of a dutiful daughter, already scripting the next scene. Her concern felt like expensive perfume, potent but fleeting. Alma's response was a Lagos storm crackling down the line. Kwame? Sickness? Umph. The Mountain King finally feels a pebble in his shoe. Her voice, still carrying the sharp edges of their shared market stall struggles, held no tremor, only a fierce, probing suspicion. What game are you playing now, brother? Or has all that gold finally choked your common sense? I'm coming. Not for your bedside tears, but to see what foolishness you've cooked up this time. Her anger at least felt real. It was fire, even if it scorched. Sound. The drone of a jet engine fades into the rhythmic thud of mortar and pestle. Kwame dismissed the last of his household staff, paying them generously for extended leave. Only Mansa, the old caretaker who remembered Nana Ya and swept the compound with a broom older than Kwame's fortune, remained. Her eyes, clouded like ancient river stones, saw too much. She moved through the echoing halls like a silent shadow, brewing pungent pre-keys tea. Not for Kwame's fictional heart, but for the soul sickness she smelled on the air. Mansa knew the scent of true illness. It wasn't the bitter tang of herbs, but the cold ash of loneliness blown across a once warm hearth. Kwame's days became a torturous vigil. He transformed his grand, sterile bedroom into a convincing sickroom. He allowed Mansa to bring simple village remedies, bitter brews in clay cups, pungent poultices of neem leaves. Their earthy smells a stark contrast to the antiseptic sterility. He lay propped on pillows, the billionaire playing pauper in his own palace. He stared at the ceiling, its high, cold expanse mirroring the emptiness within. The luxurious sheets felt like burial shrouds. Every tick of the ornate grandfather clock in the hall was a hammer blow on his conscience. Memories flooded the silence, vivid and punishing. Nana Ya, his fierce flower, her laughter echoing where now only dust motes danced. Her hands, rough from grinding cassava, gently smoothing his furrowed brow after a market loss. Her voice firm and warm. Kwame, children are not crops to be harvested when ripe. They are tender shoots needing constant sun, not just the shadow of your ambition. He had brushed her wisdom aside, mistaking provision for presence. Now her absence was a physical ache, a ghost limb reminding him of his failure. He remembered Kofi, small and wide-eyed, clinging to his leg after a nightmare, not seeking wealth, only safety in his father's solid presence. Abina, dancing barefoot in the red earth after the first rains, her joy pure, unburdened by designer labels. Amma, standing shoulder to shoulder with him, bartering fiercely in the market, her loyalty as fierce as a mother lion's. Where had those people gone? Had his gold paved the road that carried them so far away? Or had he simply stopped looking, stopped calling them back? The richest soil, untended, grows only thorns. Kwame Owusu had built empires of stone, but let the garden of his blood run wild. And now he lay amidst the weeds of his own making. The guilt was a vulture, picking at his spirit. The lie sat heavy on his tongue, a sour taste no pre-keys could cleanse. He watched Mansa move, her silent grace a reproach. She didn't speak of his family, but her eyes, when they rested on the empty spaces where laughter should have been, held an ocean of unspoken knowing. She cleaned the unused rooms, aired the linens no child would sleep in, her movements a quiet elegy for the family that was, and the one that wasn't. The first car arrived just before dusk on the second day. Not Kofi's sleek, silent electric beast, but a sturdy, dust-coated SUV roaring up the long drive. Amma. She burst into the dimly lit sick room like a desert wind, filling the sterile space with the scent of Lagos traffic, warm spices, and unresolved history. She wore rich ankara, but her posture was pure market warrior. Her eyes, sharp as obsidian shards, scanned Kwame's face, the staged medicines, the carefully arranged frailty. So, the Mountain King crumbles? You look like death warmed over, brother. Or is it just a bad performance? She stepped closer, her gaze boring into his. Where is the mighty roar? Where is the man who wrestled debt to the ground? This husk in silk sheets. She didn't touch him. Her suspicion was a wall between them. Before Kwame could muster a weak reply, the smooth purr of a luxury sedan announced Abina's arrival. She swept in, a vision of Parisian elegance, her perfume a sweet, cloying cloud. Her eyes, expertly lined, welled with manufactured tears. She rushed to the bedside, ignoring Amma, and grasped Kwame's hand, her touch cool, her French manicured nails like little shells. Oh mon pauvre papa. Look at you. Don't worry, Jean-Pierre is already contacting specialists. We will fix this. We will make you strong again. Her concern was a beautiful, fragile vase, lovely to look at, but hollow inside. Kwame looked from Amma's fiery suspicion to Abina's polished sorrow. The air crackled with tension, thick with unspoken accusations and rehearsed sympathies. The man they thought was dying lay trapped between fire and ice, neither offering the warmth he truly craved. 2 daughters arrived, one bearing the heat of doubt, the other the chill of duty. But where, child? Where was the sun? Where was the first seed planted? As the awkward silence stretched, thick enough to choke on, the distant growl of a powerful, impatient engine cut through the twilight. Headlights, bright and relentless as Kofi's ambition, swept across the window. The heir approaches, not with a healer's herbs, but with a ledger's cold gaze. The calabash of lies was set before them. Now, let the tasting begin. And may the ancestors have mercy on the hand that poisoned it. The heir entered, not with the soft footfalls of grief, but the heavy tread of conquest. Kwame Owusu stood framed in the doorway, London's chill still clinging to his tailored suit like invisible frost. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's assessing prey, swept past Amma's fiery glare, Abina's tearful pose, and fixed on Kwame. Not the father, but the failing asset. Kofi moved with swift, economical steps, a leather-bound portfolio clutched like a shield. He barely acknowledged his aunt or sister, his focus laser-sharp on the figure in the bed. He placed a cool, brief hand on Kwame's forehead, a gesture clinical, devoid of tenderness. Father, your color is poor. Vital signs. He glanced at the untouched village remedies with barely concealed disdain. Dr. Mensah's full report? Scans? I've alerted Owusu Holdings' legal team. We must secure directives immediately. Power of attorney succession protocols. The markets are volatile. Uncertainty is costly. He flipped open the portfolio, revealing dense columns of figures. Review these. Your signature is required by dawn. Kwame felt the air leave his lungs, not from illness, but from the sheer, brutal force of Kofi's disregard. The lie he had sown now yielded its bitterest harvest. His son saw only a ledger entry nearing its end. The carefully staged sick room, meant to evoke compassion, had become a boardroom annex. Abina fluttered, trying to bridge the chasm. Kofi, can't you see Papa is suffering? The doctors. Jean-Pierre is arranging. Sentimentality won't stabilize the stock price, Abina. Efficiency will. Father understands business. Don't you, father? His gaze lifted, meeting Kwame's, a challenge cold as river stone. Kwame's voice, when it came, was a dry rasp, the tremor real this time. I understand, family Kofi. Family is the business now. Protecting it is my duty. He tapped the papers. Sign. Amma had watched, silent as a gathering storm. Now she erupted. She slammed her fist on the bedside table, making the clay cup of pre-keys jump. Duty. Ha. Look at him, Kofi. Your father. Not a column in your cursed ledger. Is this what Nana bled for? So her son could become a vulture, circling his own father's still warm body. Aunt Amma, your rustic passions are noted, but emotion is poor currency. I safeguard the legacy, the real legacy, the one that builds, that endures. His gesture encompassed the opulent room, the unseen empire beyond. Abina wrung her hands, caught between the fire and the ice. Please, this helps no one. Papa needs peace. He needs care. Kwame closed his eyes. The voices swirled around him. Kofi's cold logic, Abina's brittle concern, Amma's scorching truth. He had summoned them, and now their discord was 1,000 needles piercing his pretense. He felt Munsaw's presence then, a quiet strength near the door. She held a steaming bowl, her clouded eyes seeing everything. The greed, the fear, the desperate lie. Ah, Munsa. Her silence spoke louder than the shouting. She moved like water around stone, placing the bowl near Kwame. The scent of strong herbs filled the space. Dawadawa, Preke's neem, the smell of the earth, of healing, and of bitter truths. The body's sickness, the herbs may soothe, but the spirit's sickness, that requires different medicine. Medicine no gold can buy. Her gaze lingered on each face. Kofi's impatience, Abina's distress, Amma's fury, Kwame's anguish. Sometimes the deepest wound is the one you give yourself. The words hung in the air. Kofi looked momentarily nonplussed, then dismissed her with a slight shake of his head, returning to his papers. Abina dabbed at her eyes, confused. Amma's fury seemed to bank, replaced by a deeper, more sorrowful intensity as she watched her brother. Kwame opened his eyes. He looked not at Kofi's ledger, but at the old photograph on the side table, the laughing family beneath the mango tree. He saw Nana Ya's eyes, bright and knowing. He saw the sticky hands of his children, reaching for him, not his gold. The hollowness inside him yawned wider, filled now with a crushing wave of regret, sharper than any fabricated chest pain. Nana Ya, forgive me. I traded shade for stone. A single, hot tear escaped, tracing a path through the valley on his cheek. It was the first real tear shed in that room of lies. Amma saw it. Her own eyes glistened. The anger softened, replaced by a dawning horror, a terrible suspicion taking root. Kwame. Her voice was rough. Brother, look at me. Look at me. This sickness, this weakness, is it real? Or is this another one of your tests? Like testing the sharpness of a blade on your own skin. Kwame couldn't meet her gaze. His shame was a physical weight, pressing him deeper into the pillows. He turned his face away, towards the window, towards the indifferent city lights. His silence was louder than any confession. Kofi froze, pen hovering over the document. His sharp mind, trained to detect deception in boardrooms, finally pierced the veil of his father's performance. The tremor, the tear, the shame. It didn't fit the narrative of a failing heart. It fit the narrative of a failing father. His face, usually so controlled, flickered with disbelief, then a cold, dawning fury. Obuohene gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Papa? No. You didn't, you lied? About dying. The polished performance crumbled, revealing raw hurt beneath. Why? To punish us? To see if we cared. Her voice broke on the last word. The calabash of lies, child, it could hold no more. It cracked, and what spilled out was not water, but fire. Amma stepped forward, her voice low, dangerous, trembling with a fury born of betrayal. You summoned us with the specter of death, Kwame? You played with the ancestors' patience? To test us? Like we were goats to be prodded? After all the distance you created? After burying yourself in this mountain of gold, and leaving us in its cold shadow? Her voice rose, echoing in the vast room. You want to know if we care? Look around you. Kofi sees only numbers. Obuohene sees only duty wrapped in silk. And I see the ghost of the brother I fought beside. The brother who forgot that blood, true blood, flows thicker than gold, but only when it is warmed by the same fire. She pointed a trembling finger at him, her eyes blazing. Your sickness, Kwame Owusu, is not in your heart. It is in your soul. You traded our blood for coins. And now you drown in the emptiness you bought. The fire was lit. The calabash lay shattered. And the Mountain King, in his palace of glass and lies, felt the true weight of his gold. The weight of 1,000 silences, 1,000 lost embraces, crushing the breath from his chest. He had sought proof of love, and found only the reflection of his own hollowed heart. The test was over. The verdict? Written in tears and fury, in the cold snap of a ledger closed too soon. And the ancestors, they turned their faces away. Truth, child, it strikes like lightning. It scorches the ground, lays bare the roots. Amma's fire had burned away the chaff of Kwame's pretense, leaving only the blackened soil of his shame. The air in the grand sickroom, once thick with lies, now hung heavy with the ash of betrayal. And the Mountain King, he crumbled, not from the sickness he feigned, but from the desolation he had wrought. Kwame could not lift his gaze from the cold marble floor. Amma's words, "You traded our blood for coins," echoed in the hollowed chambers of his soul, louder than any drum, sharper than any spear. The tear that had escaped felt like molten lead tracing his cheek. He saw, truly saw, the reflection of his own emptiness in Kofi's frozen fury, Obuohene's shattered confusion, Amma's righteous, heartbroken rage. The vast wealth surrounding him felt suddenly suffocating, a gilded tomb he had spent a lifetime building. Kofi was the first to move. He snapped his portfolio shut with a sound like breaking bone. The carefully prepared documents, the cold calculations of succession, were now worthless ashes in the face of this raw, ugly truth. He looked at his father, not with anger now, but with a chilling, final contempt. The bond, already frayed thin as spider silk, snapped. A test. A lie. To measure affection? He gave a short, bitter laugh, devoid of humor. You measured nothing but the depth of your own folly, father. My time is currency. You have squandered mine, and any remaining claim on it. He turned, his polished shoes clicking a harsh rhythm on the marble, a drumbeat of finality. He did not look back. The door closed behind him with a soft, devastating click. The sound of an empire of the heart, abandoned. Obuohene stood trembling, her elegant facade utterly crumbled. Tears, real tears this time, streaked her perfect makeup. Not tears for a dying father, but for the shattering of an illusion, the brutal exposure of a love tested and found. Transactional? Her voice was a bewildered whisper. Papa, why? Why make us fear? Why make us run for nothing? She looked around the opulent room, at Amma's stern, tear-streaked face, at her father's broken form. The Parisian salons, Jean-Pierre's connections, they felt like a flimsy stage set collapsing. You wanted us here? But like this? In panic? In pain? She shook her head, a lost child. I don't understand this game. She backed away, her designer heels unsteady on the polished floor. I need air. I need to think. She fled, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering like a ghost of her confusion. Only Amma remained, a pillar of storm-swept grief. The fire of her accusation had burned down to embers of profound sorrow. She looked at Kwame, her brother, the fierce market warrior reduced to a shamed husk in silk. Her own tears flowed freely now, carving paths through the dust of her journey. You fool, Kwame. You great, lonely fool. Did you think love could be summoned like a servant? Tested like bad coin? She stepped closer, not with anger now, but with a crushing weight of disappointment. We loved you. Once. Under that mango tree. When your hands were dirty, and your heart was present. She placed a hand, rough and warm, on his cold forehead, a gesture echoing Kofi's clinical touch but imbued with immeasurable sadness. You starved that love, brother. You let the gold grow weeds around it. And now you wonder why it doesn't bloom on command. She withdrew her hand, the warmth leaving Kwame more bereft than ever. The ancestors weep for your blindness. Nana, yeah, she weeps. She turned, her shoulders slumped under the weight of a shared history now broken. I will stay tonight. Not for you. For the memory of the brother, who once carried me on his back through the floodwaters. But come dawn, I return to Lagos. There is nothing for me here but ashes. She walked out, leaving the scent of Lagos spices and ancient sorrow. Kwame was alone, utterly, desolately alone. The grand room, his palace of achievement, felt cavernous, mocking. The lies he had spun now choked him, tightening around his chest like iron bands. Amma's touch, her final words, echoed. You starved that love. The guilt, the regret, the crushing weight of his own folly descended upon him, a physical avalanche. He gasped, a ragged, desperate sound. This time, the pain was real, sharp, terrifying. A vice clamped around his heart, squeezing the breath from his lungs. Not the emptiness of loneliness, but the brutal, seizing agony of a spirit poisoned by its own venom. He clawed at his chest, his vision blurring, the opulent room dissolving into streaks of meaningless light and shadow. He slumped back, a ragged moan escaping his lips. The sickness he summoned with false words found fertile ground in a soul laid waste by truth. The body, weary vessel of a broken spirit, finally rebelled. Mansa moved then, swift and silent as shadow. She was beside him in an instant, her old hands surprisingly strong, easing him down, calling out in a voice that cracked the silence like a whip. Dr. Mensah, who had lingered nearby sensing the storm, rushed in. The sterile clinic lights flickered on, banishing the gloom, revealing Kwame's ashen face, the sheen of cold sweat, the terrifying struggle for breath. The performance was over. The emergency was real. Hours passed in a haze of pain and fragmented awareness. Kwame drifted in a twilight world, tethered by needles and humming machines. The sharp, clean smell of antiseptic battled the lingering scent of Munsah's bitter herbs. Voices murmured, Dr. Mensah's low, grave tones. But cutting through the fog, a constant anchor, was the low, rhythmic murmur of Munsah. She sat by his bedside, not on the plush chair, but on a simple stool she had brought. Her voice was a soft river flowing through his delirium, speaking not to him, perhaps, but to the ancestors, to the spirits of the place. The baobab does not grow tall by forgetting its roots. The river remembers every stone it has smoothed. The axe may forget, Nananam, but the tree remembers the bite. The tree remembers. Her cool, rough hand rested on his burning forehead. A connection to something solid, something ancient and real beneath the sterile chaos. In his fevered state, the past bled into the present. He wasn't in the clinic. He was back beneath the great mango tree in Kumasi. The air was thick with the scent of ripe fruit and red earth after rain. Nana sat beside him, her smile warm, her eyes holding that familiar, knowing sadness. Kofi, small again, built a wobbly tower of pebbles, his brow furrowed in fierce concentration. Abina danced in a patch of sunlight, her laughter pure and unburdened. Amma, young and strong, argued playfully with him about market prices. The warmth, the presence, was so vivid, so achingly real. It brought fresh tears to his closed eyes. He reached out a trembling hand, whispering, "Stay, please." In the land between waking and dreaming, the ancestors showed him the garden he had abandoned, the laughter he had traded for ledgers, the embrace he had exchanged for empty space. Dr. Mensah monitored the machines, his face grave. The physical crisis was easing, the heart calming under medication. But his eyes, when they met Mensah's, spoke of a deeper wound. "The body will heal, Mensah," he murmured, his voice heavy. "But the spirit, it carries a burden heavier than any mountain of gold. It is poisoned by the venom of its own making." Mensah nodded, her hand never leaving Kwame's brow. "The tree remembers the axe, doctor," she whispered, her gaze fixed on Kwame's tormented face. "Always. Now he must learn if the roots still live beneath the scar." As the fever broke near dawn, Kwame swam back towards consciousness. The ghostly warmth of the mango tree faded. The phantom laughter dissolved. He was back in the cold, humming clinic. The weight of his actions, the desolation of his family's departure, the crushing reality of his solitude, it all crashed down upon him with renewed force. He opened his eyes, blurred with tears, not of pain, but of immeasurable, irreparable loss. He saw Mensah's patient face, her eyes holding a sorrow as deep as his own, but also a flicker of something else. Not pity, understanding. The understanding of the earth that endures all seasons. His lips, dry and cracked, moved. No sound came at first. Then, a breath, a whisper so faint it was almost lost in the hum of the machines. A name, carried on a tide of anguish and the first, fragile seedling of remorse. Nana. Yeah. He called for the wife he had lost, and the love he had squandered. The Mountain King lay broken, not by sickness, but by the avalanche of his own truth. The test was ended. The results were etched in the empty spaces around his bed. And the dawn brought only rain, and the terrible echoing question. Can roots regrow after the axe has fallen? Rain falls, child. It washes the ash of burned bridges. But can it nourish seeds buried deep beneath the scorched earth? Kwame Owusu lay in the humming clinic, not a king, but a man hollowed out by his own hand. The lie had been a knife, and he had turned it upon himself. Now, only the drumbeat of the machines and Mensah's unwavering presence filled the space where family should have been. The days that followed were a slow, painful emergence from darkness. The physical grip on his heart eased under Dr. Mensah's care, but the deeper wound, the spirit sickness Mensah spoke of festered. Kwame moved through the clinic's routines like a sleepwalker, his eyes haunted. He saw Kofi's cold contempt, Abina's shattered confusion, Amma's sorrowful fury every time he closed his eyes. The vast, silent palace loomed in his mind, a monument to his loneliness. He couldn't return to that gilded tomb. One rain-washed morning, as Munsa helped him sit by a window overlooking a small, struggling herb garden Dr. Mensa kept, Kwame spoke. His voice was a dry leaf scraping stone. "Munsa, the palace. Sell it." Munsa didn't startle. She continued grinding dawadawa in a small mortar, the rhythmic thud-thud-thud a grounding beat. "Sell the stone mountain, Obuohene? And go where?" "Back to the dust." Kwame looked out at the rain-slicked leaves, emerald bright. "Not back. Somewhere. The roots might still drink." He paused, the effort immense. "Kumasi, near the old market, where the air smells of spice and life, not polished emptiness." He spoke not of a return to glory, but a return to earth, to the scent of groundnut roasting, of smoked fish, of sweat and struggle and the raw hum of being alive. He sought not his past, but the soil it grew from. Munsa's rhythmic grinding paused. A slow nod. "The baobab does not fear the storm, Kwame Owusu. It bends, and remembers its roots are deep. Kumasi remembers you too, not the mountain king, but the young man with fire in his eyes and cassava flour on his hands." She resumed her grinding, the sound now carrying a different weight. "I will make the arrangements. For a small place, with a courtyard, for a tree perhaps." The selling of the Accra Palace was swift, orchestrated by faceless lawyers Kofi had likely instructed. The billions were moved, secured, but Kwame cared little. He took only a few things. The faded photograph beneath the mango tree, Nana Yass worn, wooden hair comb, a single simple Kent cloth she had woven for him in their first year of marriage, its colors muted by time and love, and Munsa. They traveled not in a fleet of obsidian cars, but in a sturdy, unmarked vehicle, back to the red earth of Kumasi. He settled not in a mansion, but in a modest, sun-washed compound near the market's edge. The air did smell of life, pungent, vibrant, overwhelming after the sterile silence of Accra. Munsa swept the red earth courtyard, humming an old tune. Kwame sat on a simple wooden stool beneath a young, hopeful mango sapling Munsa had planted, its leaves trembling in the breeze. He wore a simple cotton tunic, not silk. He looked old, weathered, the lines on his face no longer maps of power, but of sorrow weathered by the sun. He watched the market's relentless flow, a tide of humanity he had once risen from and then forgotten. He did not hide. He sat. He watched. He breathed the dust of his beginning. The mighty Obuohene was now simply a Jai, the one who has returned. Some recognized the ghost of the fierce young trader beneath the aged face, the eyes now holding a different kind of fire, the smoldering embers of regret. They whispered. They pointed. But Kwame just sat, learning the language of humility, syllable by painful syllable. Weeks bled into months. He began to walk, slowly at first, leaning on a staff carved from the branch of an old odum tree. He walked the market's familiar, chaotic alleys. He didn't buy. He didn't sell. He observed. He saw the young mothers bargaining fiercely, their babies strapped to their backs, their eyes holding the same determined fire Nana Ya once had. He saw the old men playing aware under the shade of a giant wawa tree, their laughter raspy but real. He saw the struggle, the sweat, the small kindnesses, a shared bowl of fufu, a helping hand with a heavy load, the things his gold had insulated him from, the things that truly nourished the spirit. One sweltering afternoon, drawn by the rhythmic thud of pestles, he found himself near a communal fufu pounding area. 3 women, their backs strong, their laughter easy, pounded cassava in a large wooden mortar. Sweat glistened on their skin. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump was primal, grounding. Kwame stood, transfixed, leaning on his staff. One woman, older, her face a map of kindness and hardship, looked up, catching his gaze. She smiled, a gap-toothed, genuine grin. "Old father, your legs tired? Come sit on that stool there. The shade is good. The pounding makes the fufu smooth, and the heart light." She gestured to a simple wooden stool nearby. Kwame hesitated. The invitation was simple, human. Not to a boardroom, but to shade. Not for his signature, but for his presence. He shuffled forward, lowering himself onto the stool with a grateful sigh. He didn't speak. He just watched the powerful, graceful arc of their pestles, felt the vibration in the earth beneath him, smelled the earthy scent of the cassava. It was a profound, wordless communion. Munsa, watching from the compound gate, saw the first flicker of something like peace touch his eyes. He sat in the shade offered by strangers. He received the gift of simple presence. And the roots, starved for so long, began to feel the first, tentative touch of water. He started small. He would buy oranges not from the grand stall, but from the small girl with the shy smile. He'd pay double, silently, walking away before she could protest. He'd help Munsa carry water from the shared borehole, his old shoulders protesting, but the weight feeling real earned. He began talking to Munsa, truly talking, not giving orders but sharing memories, of Nanaya, of the early market days, of his own foolish pride. The words were halting, laced with shame, but they flowed like a long-dammed stream finding its course. One evening, as the fiery African sun bled into the horizon, painting the compound in hues of gold and crimson, Kwame sat beneath the young mango tree. He held Nanaya's comb. He spoke softly, not to the air, but to her spirit, to the ancestors. "I was blind, Nanaya, stone blind. I built mountains and called them home. Forgive me, my fierce flower. Forgive me, my children." The words "my children" caught in his throat, raw with longing and remorse. He didn't hear her approach at first. Abina stood at the compound gate, not in Parisian silks, but in a simple, elegant dress of Ghanaian cotton. Her face was bare of heavy makeup, her eyes holding a vulnerability he hadn't seen since she was a child dancing in the rain. She looked older, wiser, carrying a quiet sorrow of her own. She saw him there, the once mighty mountain king, reduced yet somehow more, bathed in the sunset's glow, speaking to ghosts. Tears welled in her eyes. "Papa!" Kwame startled, turning. Seeing her, truly seeing her beneath the polished layers that had begun to peel away, his breath hitched. Shame, hope, overwhelming love warred within him. He couldn't speak. He simply held out a hand, rough now, marked by simple work, trembling. The hand that had signed billion CD deals now reached out. For forgiveness. For connection. Abina hesitated, only a heartbeat. Then, she crossed the courtyard, not with a sweeping entrance, but with hesitant steps. She knelt beside his stool, ignoring the red earth on her dress. She didn't take his hand immediately. She looked into his eyes, searching for the truth, the man beneath the ruin. "I went back to Paris, Papa. I sat in that perfect apartment, and felt emptier than this courtyard before Munsa swept it." Kofi's words. Ama's fire. Your face when we left." A tear escaped, tracing a clean path down her cheek. "I realized I had traded my own roots for silk slippers. I was lost too." She finally placed her hand, cool and soft, over his weathered one. "I don't know if I can forget the lie, Papa, the fear it caused. But I remember the mango tree. I remember the man who carried me when I scraped my knee. Is he still there? Buried beneath the gold and the hurt?" Kwame closed his eyes, tears squeezing through his lashes. He turned his hand, clasping hers with surprising strength. His voice, when it came, was a rasp of raw emotion. He is trying, Abina. He is digging through the stone, trying to find the earth again, trying to be worthy of the shade. He didn't ask about Kofi. He didn't ask about Amma. This moment, this fragile tendril of connection with his daughter, was a miracle he dared not shatter with demands. Abina rested her head against his knee, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, not of grief this time, but of release, of a long journey home begun. Munsa watched from the doorway, a slow, deep smile spreading across her face, like the first green shoot after the long drought. The rain had fallen. The seed, cracked and near dead, had found a sliver of fertile ground. One daughter had returned, not summoned by a lie of death, but drawn by the quiet, painful truth of a father seeking redemption. The calabash, though scarred by the fire, remembered it was made for water, and the first drop tasted sweeter than all the gold in Obuohene. Weeks turned. Abina stayed, not as a visitor, but as someone rediscovering her own roots. She helped Munsa in the market, her designer hands learning the texture of plantain, the weight of yam. She listened, truly listened, to Kwame's halting stories, his regrets. A tentative warmth, fragile as a butterfly's wing, began to grow in the sun-drenched courtyard. Then one market day, bustling and loud, Kwame was haggling playfully, a skill returning slowly, over a basket of sweet potatoes with the gap-toothed woman from the fufu pounding. A shadow fell over the stall. Kwame looked up. Amma stood there. Not in fierce ankara, but in a simple, practical wrapper. Her face was stern, unreadable. Beside her, holding her hand tightly, was a small boy of about 5, his eyes wide with the market's wonders. Kwame's heart stopped. His grandson. He'd never met him. Amma's gaze locked with Kwame's. No words passed between them for a long moment. The market noise fading into a distant hum. The years of distance, the betrayal, the fury hung heavy. Then Amma's stern expression softened, just a fraction. She gave the boy a gentle nudge. Amma, Kwame Jr., say good afternoon to your grandfather. The boy looked up at Kwame, curious, shy. Kwame, his throat tight, knelt slowly, painfully, ignoring the protest of his knees in the red earth. He met the boy's eyes that held echoes of Kofi's intensity, Abina's light, and perhaps a spark of Nana Yass knowing. Afternoon, grandfather. The words, simple, innocent, shattered the last of Kwame's defenses. Tears streamed freely down his face now, carving paths through the market dust. He didn't reach for the boy. He just looked at him, drinking in the miracle of this new life, this fragile hope. He wanted to see the market, the real market. She paused, her own eyes suspiciously bright. And he wanted to meet the grandfather who planted a mango tree. Kwame looked up at Amma, his eyes overflowing with gratitude, remorse, and a dawning, humble joy. He nodded, unable to speak. Amma gave a curt nod back. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. A crack in the wall. A recognition of shared blood, and perhaps the possibility of shared earth. The tree remembers the axe, child. But deep beneath the scar, the roots remember the rain. The roots remember the sun. And sometimes against all hope, against all the poison poured upon it, a new shoot finds the strength to push towards the light. Kwame Owusu, the mountain king who became a Jai the root seeker, held his grandson's gaze in the vibrant chaos of the Kumasi market. The calabash of his life, once filled with the dust of loneliness, now held a single, precious drop of water, and the promise of more. Kwame slowly rose. He reached not for gold, but into the folds of his simple cotton tunic. He pulled out a small, smooth stone, river-washed, warm from his touch. He had found it by the borehole weeks before. He held it out to Kwame Jr. "For you, little warrior. A stone from the earth. Strong. Simple. Real. Hold it tight. Remember, the most precious things are not always the ones that shine the brightest." The boy took the stone, his small fingers curling around it, a serious expression on his face as he examined the humble gift. Amma watched, a single tear escaping her fierce guard, tracing a path down her cheek, mingling with the market dust. Abina, drawn by the scene, appeared beside her father, slipping her hand into his, her own eyes shining. Munsa stood near the compound gate, her clouded eyes seeing the deep roots stirring, the new life pushing through. She nodded slowly, a silent prayer to the ancestors. The story does not end with riches regained, child. It ends with roots rediscovered. It ends with the slow, painful mending of a broken calabash, drop by precious drop. It ends not with a king on a mountain, but with an old man in the red earth, surrounded by the fragile, beautiful beginnings of a garden he had once thought forever lost. The ancestors whisper. Even the driest ground remembers how to drink. Ah, little fires gathered around this digital hearth. Did you feel the rumble of the ancestors' drums? Did you taste the salt of Kwame's tears and the sweetness of that first drop of forgiveness? The tale of the Mountain King and the Calabash of Lies has poured its last drop, but the wisdom remains. Share this water, children. Carry this tale to other fires. Share this video. Let its truth ripple out like a stone cast into the great river. Leave your mark below. Whisper your thoughts in the comments. What seed did this story plant in your own soul? And ring the iron bell loud. Subscribe. For this channel is a baobab of tales, its branches heavy with stories yet untold. Stories of cunning spiders, lion-hearted mothers, trickster gods, and the quiet magic woven into the dust of everyday life. Press the bell, let its chime call you back. Tomorrow, beneath this same digital moon, another fire will be lit. Another tale will unfold. Another piece of the great, beating heart of Africa will be laid bare. Come, gather close. The stories are endless, and the Griot's voice has only just begun. Subscribe, share, comment, ring the bell. The ancestors are listening, and the next story waits.